I bought the land for one reason: the private creek that ran straight through it. Crystal clear water, stocked with fish, and written into my deed as exclusive creek rights. But one morning I looked outside and saw half the HOA standing in the water, fishing like it was a public park. When I told them to leave, they laughed and said the HOA owned everything. So I let them keep fishing, just long enough for the game warden to arrive. And when he checked the boundary markers and property records, every single one of them learned the hard way what trespassing on protected private waterways really means. The creek was the reason I bought the property. Not the house. Not the acreage. The water. A cold, clear ribbon of moving glass cut straight through the land, winding between cottonwood trees and smooth stone bank. It was stocked naturally, fed by a spring higher in the hills, and according to the deed, the creek and all fishing rights belonged exclusively to the property owner, me. That detail mattered. The real estate agent had emphasized it 3 times when I signed the papers. Private water rights. No public access. No HOA access. Perfect. I wanted quiet mornings, a fishing pole, and no one else's footsteps in the water. For the first 2 weeks, that's exactly what I had. Until Saturday. I woke up to voices. Not birds. Not wind. People. I stepped onto my back porch and froze. There were at least 12 HOA residents standing in my creek, knee-deep in my water, fishing poles in hand, coolers on my bank. One guy even had a folding chair planted in the gravel like he owned the place. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I walked down toward the creek. "Excuse me," I said, loud but calm. "You all need to get out of the water." They turned to look at me like I'd interrupted a picnic. A woman in a bright HOA jacket scoffed. "This creek runs through the neighborhood. We're allowed to use it." "No, you're not," I replied. "This section is on my deed. It's private." A man with a fishing vest laughed. "HOA rules say common waterways are shared." "That's not how property works," I said. Another woman rolled her eyes. "You just moved in. Everyone fishes here. That doesn't make it legal." They didn't move. In fact, one of them cast his line deeper into the water just to prove a point. "Look," the HOA woman said, stepping toward me, "this creek has been used by our residents for years. You don't get to shut it down." I held up my phone. "My deed says otherwise." She barely glanced at it. "The HOA trumps your paperwork." That's when I realized something. They weren't confused. They were entitled. "Last warning," I said. "Get out of the creek." A guy near the bank smirked. "What are you gonna do, call the police?" "No," I replied. "I'm calling the game warden." They laughed. All of them. Like I just threatened to call a mall security guard. So I let them keep fishing. I sat on my porch, watched them catch trout from my water, watched them joke and brag like they owned it. And I made one phone call. 45 minutes later, a green truck pulled up at the edge of my property. The laughter stopped. 2 uniformed game wardens stepped out. "Afternoon," one said. "We got a report of unauthorized fishing on private water." The HOA group froze. The woman in the jacket stepped forward. "We have HOA permission." The warden shook his head. "Doesn't matter. This creek section is listed as privately deeded water." I handed him my property documents. He read them, nodded, then turned to the group. "Everyone in the creek," he said, "step out and show me your licenses." They started talking all at once. "But we thought," the HOA said. The warden cut them off. "Doesn't matter. You are all trespassing on protected private water." One by one, they climbed out of the creek. Wet, embarrassed, suddenly quiet. Some didn't even have fishing licenses. The citations started being written. And that's when the HOA woman finally realized. They had just fished themselves into a very expensive lesson. And this was only the beginning. By the time the last citation was written, the creek was silent. No splashing, no laughing, no fishing lines cutting through my water. Just the sound of the current flowing the way it always had, undisturbed. The HOA group stood on my bank in a tight, angry cluster while the game wardens packed up their clipboards. The woman in the HOA jacket finally snapped. "This is ridiculous," she said. "We've been using that creek for years." One of the wardens looked at her. "And for years, you were trespassing." "That can't be right," a man in waiters said. "The HOA told us it was shared." The warden shook his head. "HOAs don't override property law. And they don't override water rights." He pointed at my deed. "This section of the creek is privately owned and protected. You were all fishing without permission on deeded water. That's a violation." Some of them started arguing. Some started begging. A few just stared at the ground. The warden wasn't impressed. "If anyone comes back into this section of creek without written permission," he said, "they'll be cited again, and next time it won't be just a fine." The green truck drove off, leaving the HOA residents standing there with pink slips in their hand. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. 30 minutes later, an SUV with an HOA logo pulled into my driveway. Out stepped a man in a blazer and sunglasses, holding a tablet like it was a weapon. "I'm the HOA property manager," he said. "We've received multiple complaints about you interfering with community access." "I stopped trespassing," I replied. He smirked. "The creek is part of our neighborhood's shared amenities." "No, it isn't." I handed him my deed. He didn't even look at it. "The HOA has easement rights," he said confidently. "You want to test that?" I asked. "We already have," he replied. "Our legal team says you can't restrict access." That was interesting. "Then why did the game wardens just cite 12 of your residents?" He hesitated for half a second, just long enough to tell me he didn't know that part yet. "That doesn't matter," he said quickly. "Those citations will be appealed." "They won't." He frowned. "You don't get to decide that." "No," I said. "The state does." He stepped closer. "Listen, you just moved in. You don't want to make enemies with your HOA. I'm not in your HOA. You live in the development. I live on my land." He pointed toward the creek. "That water runs through the neighborhood. And through my deed." He sighed like I was being difficult. "Let me be clear," he said. "Our residents will continue using the creek." "If they do," I replied, "they'll keep getting fined." "That's not how this works." "That's exactly how this works." He left in a hurry. An hour later, 2 trucks showed up. HOA maintenance. They started unloading stakes and orange tape near the creek. I walked down to them. "What are you doing?" "Installing access markers," one said. "HOA orders." "You don't have permission to be here." "We do." "From who?" "The HOA." I called the game warden back. When he arrived and saw the stakes, his jaw tightened. "Who told you to do this?" he asked the workers. "The HOA," they replied. He pulled out his radio. Within 20 minutes, the county sheriff showed up. Now it wasn't just fishing. It was attempted land modification on protected private water. The HOA manager came flying back in his SUV. "This is harassment," he shouted. "You're bullying a community." "No," the sheriff said calmly. "Your community is trespassing." The HOA manager's face went pale. "These water rights are federally recognized," the game warden added. "You can't just declare them HOA property." That was the moment the power dynamic flipped. The HOA had assumed I was just one guy. They didn't realize they were picking a fight with state-protected creek rights. The sheriff issued a formal warning. Any HOA resident or employee entering my creek area again would face criminal trespass charges. The stakes were pulled out. The tape was removed. And for the first time, the HOA had to accept something they hated. The creek wasn't theirs. And no amount of attitude, paperwork, or bullying was going to change that. By the time the second sheriff's truck rolled up beside the creek, I was already ankle-deep in the cold, clear water, pretending to inspect a tangle of reed. In reality, I was watching the 3 HOA board members on the far bank like a hawk. They were still holding their fishing rods, still wearing those smug little half-smiles, like they couldn't believe someone had finally challenged them. Behind me, the wooden bridge creaked as the deputies stepped down. Gravel crunched. Radios hissed. "All right," one of them called out, a tall man with a sun-creased face and a badge that looked like it had seen decades of dust and trouble. "We got a report of trespassing and harassment." "Who called it in?" "I did," I said, turning slowly, letting them see I wasn't hiding anything. "This is my property. The creek runs through my land, and those folks are fishing on it without permission." One of the HOA women scoffed loudly. "Oh, come on. That creek has always been used by the neighborhood. Everyone fishes here." The deputy raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, that's not how property rights work." I pulled a folded stack of papers from my jacket pocket and handed it over. "Here's the deed. And here's the water rights agreement attached to it. The creek, including both banks and the streambed, is part of my parcel for over a mile." He took his time reading it. The other deputy stepped over to the HOA group, asking for their IDs. The man with the expensive sunglasses, the HOA president I'd learned, crossed his arms. "This is ridiculous. We maintain that area. We pay for landscaping. That makes it community property." I couldn't help but laugh. "You mow the grass near it. That doesn't give you ownership of the water." The first deputy looked up from the paperwork. "These documents are clear. This creek is privately owned. Do you folks have written permission from him to be here?" Silence. One of the women shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't think we needed it." "Well, you do," the deputy said flatly. That's when things got messy. The HOA president suddenly took a step closer to me, jabbing a finger in my direction. "You moved here and decided to ruin everything for everyone. This is why people like you don't belong in our community." The deputy immediately stepped between us. "Sir, back up. He's harassing us," the woman with the clipboard added quickly. "He threatened to have us arrested." I shook my head. I told them they were trespassing and that I'd call the sheriff if they didn't leave. Which I did. The second deputy finished running their IDs and walked back. "They've all been warned before for similar complaints along this same creek. Different landowner, same issue." That was news to me, and judging by the HOA faces, it was news they didn't want repeated. "So what happens now?" the president asked, suddenly less confident. "Now," the deputy replied. "Now you're all being cited for trespassing. And if you don't leave immediately, you'll be escorted off." The clipboard woman gasped. "Cited? Over fishing. Over being where you're not allowed to be," he corrected. As the deputies started writing tickets, I walked back to the bank and stood beside them. The creek glinted behind me, sunlight breaking through the trees like a spotlight. It felt symbolic. This narrow strip of water had become a line in the sand. Or in this case, the gravel. "You think this is over?" the HOA president muttered, signing his citation with an angry scribble. "No," I said honestly. "But this part is." They packed up their rods in bitter silence. No more smug smiles. No more confident posturing. Just tight jaws and darting eyes as they realized the power they were used to wielding didn't apply out here. When they finally left, the deputies turned to me. "You might want to expect more trouble," the older one said. "HOA boards don't like losing." "I figured," I replied. "But I'm not backing down." He nodded approvingly. "Good. Just keep everything documented. Cameras, signs, the works." After they drove off, the creek felt quieter, almost peaceful again. Birds chirped. Water rippled over smooth stones. It was hard to believe that just minutes ago, it had been the center of a standoff. I knelt down and dipped my hand into the water. It was icy and clean, mine to protect now. Whatever the HOA tried next, they'd just learned one important thing. This property wasn't theirs to bully anymore. And the war over my land had officially begun. The citations didn't stop them. If anything, they made the HOA angrier. 2 days after the deputies cleared the creek, I woke up to the sound of engines outside my fence. When I stepped onto my porch, I saw 3 HOA trucks parked along the road, and a group of workers unloading wooden posts and rolls of wire. They were building a fence right across the path that led from the neighborhood to my creek. I walked down immediately. "What do you think you're doing?" One of the workers looked uncomfortable. "We were told to mark the HOA boundary." "This isn't HOA land," I said. "You're on private property." A familiar voice answered me. The HOA president stepped out of one of the trucks, sunglasses on, smug smile back in place. "We're protecting our residents," he said. "Since you're being unreasonable, we're creating a legal access corridor. You can't just build on my land." "We can when we have an easement." I stared at him. "You don't." "We filed for one yesterday." "That doesn't mean it exists." He shrugged. "The paperwork's in process." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "You are trespassing and attempting to alter protected creek land. Leave now." He smirked. "Call whoever you want." So I did. This time, I didn't just call the sheriff. I called the state water authority, and the game warden, and the county land office. Within an hour, 3 different government vehicles were parked in my driveway. The workers froze when they saw them. The HOA president didn't. He walked forward confidently. "This is a civil property dispute." The water authority agent looked at the stakes already hammered into the soil beside the creek. "Those posts are inside a protected riparian zone," she said. "Who authorized this?" "The HOA." She cut him off. "No one but the property owner can authorize work here. This creek is under state-protected water rights." The game warden stepped beside her. "We already cited your residents for trespassing. Now you're modifying the land." The sheriff crossed his arms. "That's criminal." For the first time, the HOA president's smile cracked. "We were just marking boundaries." "On land you don't own," the water agent replied. She turned to me. "Do you give permission for this work?" "No," I said. "Then it stops." Immediately, the workers dropped their tools. The HOA president started talking fast. "You don't understand. This creek has always been part of the community." "That's irrelevant," the sheriff said. "What matters is whose name is on the deed." He looked at me. "It's yours." The HOA president finally realized he was losing control. "You can't just take our amenity away." "I didn't take it," I said. "I bought it." The water authority issued a formal cease and desist right there on the spot. The HOA was forbidden from entering, marking, or altering any part of the creek on my property. If they did, fines would start at 5 figures. The trucks left. The workers left. The HOA president stood there for a long moment, staring at the creek like it had betrayed him. "This isn't over," he muttered. "No," I replied. "But it's not yours anymore." That night, new signs went up along my property line. "Private property. No trespassing. State-protected waterway." The next morning, I installed cameras overlooking the creek. And just like that, the power shifted. The HOA couldn't bully its way into water rights, couldn't override state law, couldn't pretend my land was theirs anymore. They had tried to take the creek by force. All they'd done was give me more proof. And the more proof I had, the closer they were getting to something they really feared: losing. By the end of the week, the HOA was quiet. Not peaceful, quiet in the way people get when they realize they've stepped into something much bigger than they expected. No more fishing poles, no more trucks, no more workers sneaking down to the water. Just a handful of furious HOA emails demanding meetings I refused to attend. Instead, I let the law do what it does best. The State Water Authority completed its review first. The creek wasn't just privately deeded, it was classified as a protected waterway tied to my land parcel. That meant any unauthorized entry wasn't just trespassing anymore, it was a state-level violation, which meant the HOA had made a catastrophic mistake. 2 weeks after the fence incident, 3 official letters were delivered to the HOA office. One from the Water Authority, one from the county, one from the state attorney's office. They all said the same thing in different legal language. Stop. The HOA was ordered to permanently cease all claims to the creek, all access attempts, and all enforcement against me. They were fined for unauthorized land alteration. And because they'd tried to establish false easements, the state flagged them for a property rights investigation. The HOA president tried to fight it. He called me personally. "This is getting out of hand," he said. "We can compromise." "You already tried," I replied. "You can't just lock an entire neighborhood out of water." "I didn't. The law did." "You're going to make enemies." "You already did." He hung up. 3 days later, the fines hit. 5 figures. Then another 5. Every stake, every post, every unauthorized mark on the creek bank had a penalty attached. The HOA board held an emergency meeting. I didn't attend, but I didn't need to. 2 homeowners knocked on my door that night. They weren't angry. They were scared. "We were told the creek was community property," one said. "Is that not true?" "No," I replied. "You were lied to." They stared at the water flowing behind my house. "So if we go in there again, you'll be cited again. Maybe arrested next time." The word arrested did something the HOA never could. It made them think. Within days, signs appeared on their side of the creek. "No access. Private waterway." The HOA quietly removed the fishing dock they'd built years ago. And just like that, the water was mine again. But the real blow came when the property manager was fired. The HOA board had been told by their lawyers that the creek dispute had opened them up to massive liability, not just from me, but from their own residents who had been fined and cited because of HOA lies. Someone had to take the fall. It wasn't me. A month later, the HOA updated its governing document. The creek was no longer listed as a shared amenity. The fishing photos disappeared from their website. The president avoided me whenever we crossed paths. And every time someone from the neighborhood walked past the creek now, they stayed on their side of the line. They finally understood something they never had before. They didn't own everything. They couldn't bully their way into land. And water, especially water with deeds and state protection, was something even an HOA couldn't steal. One morning, I stood on my bank with a fishing rod. No noise. No shouting. No argument. Just water, sunlight, and a slow, steady current moving exactly where it wanted to go. I cast my line into the creek. It felt like freedom. Not because I won, but because I had protected something that was always mine. And the HOA? They learned a lesson they'll never forget. Some property lines aren't just on paper. Some run straight through the water.